the brutality and shock of the horrors of the Israeli-Hamas war has been something that the world has not seen in a long, long time. Just the sheer audacity of some of the brutality that's been inflicted upon the Israeli people is just shocking to see. And we've all seen scenes of it. But let me show you one of the things I want to point out here right now. This recent report really shows what some of the things Hamas has done.
At least 260 people were gunned down at a music festival held in the name of peace, the vast majority of the victims young partygoers, and 700 died across the country. Their Hamas killers came from the sky in paragliders and stormed across the border from Gaza on motorbikes and in trucks, before unleashing a deadly hail of bullets. One young German woman's naked and desecrated corpse was paraded for the cameras by celebrating terrorists and spat on by bystanders. 130 people, including many from the festival, were taken back to Gaza alive to be bartered for Palestinians currently held in Israeli prisons. In total, more than 2,000 people were wounded in the largest surprise attack on Israel since Yom Kippur, almost 50 years ago to the day.
Those images are really hard to watch, and it's hard to even imagine that people can do this to other people, especially young people who had nothing to do with anything, were just trying to have a good time watching a concert. That would suddenly be thrust into the central part of a war is just unimaginable. Because look, any war is brutal. We see this all the time in the Russia-Ukraine war, that there's lots of civilians are caught in the crossfire when a lot of these cities are hit with bombs, or just even if they're specifically targeted. But what we haven't seen is where the opponents intentionally designed to target civilians. And that's what happened with Hamas here. And that's why this has so shocked the sensibilities of many in the world today, because that wasn't a collateral damage, so they called, but that was a primary target. And that music festival is one of the most egregious examples. And current reporting is saying that there could have been many children and babies even potentially were targeted. We're not clear if all those reports are accurate, but many are, and we know for sure that's the case. And in this light, it's very clear, and almost no one in the world is upset that Israel would want to defend itself. Certainly not in the United States. Anytime you've been attacked, it's a universal right to self-defense, and you can take care of yourself and defend yourself when you're wronged in such an egregious way. And everybody understands in the United States that Israel fully deserves to defend itself and has the absolute right to do that. However, Israel must be careful that in their just desire for justice and revenge on their enemies, that they don't go too far, because it is possible that in their this drive to get justice for what happened to their innocent people, that they go too far, because the issue is between Israel and Hamas. And Hamas is not synonymous with the Palestinians. We need to make sure that we're clear on this point, that the Palestinian people themselves, in many cases, have been victimized by all sides for quite a long time. In fact, this summer, not many in the West are aware of it, but 227 Palestinian men, women, children were actually killed by Israeli Defense Forces during protests that happened during the summer, when they were protesting this horrible living conditions, and felt grievous at that, because not many in the West even saw those reports. But now then, in Israel, so far as its response has actually caused tremendous damage to the very people in Palestine who were victimized before. And now then, because Hamas is mixed in among them, there has been terrible casualties caused. And a lot of scenes you may have seen on the news so far is showing about how bad some of this devastation is. There was one particular place where it honestly looked like New York after 9/11. I mean, it was just devastated. We're not talking about targeted shots that went in to take out suspected terrorists. Which we have done sometimes, even in built up areas. We'll send in a precision guided missile and we'll take out, whether it's Al Qaeda or Taliban or something like that. And sometimes that has collateral damage, and sometimes civilians have been killed. And sometimes you can't avoid that in war. And that's a true statement. But when you see entire city blocks just wiped out, then you have to say, you got to be careful, Israel, that you don't go too far in getting defense on your enemies. Because if we're killing lots of innocent people in the process, then that could actually undermine global support for Israel. It could undermine Western support if it gets too egregious. And another example was that the one of the universities in the Gaza Strip, one of the places where they try to educate their young people, was completely obliterated. I mean, it looks like something from World War II in Dresden, or a firebombing or something like that. The whole place has been wiped out, and it's hard to say that that was a targeted strike that was based on a good intelligence. And Israel has to be careful. I sorry if I sound redundant here, but it's important for Israel to maintain its integrity and its justifiable position, so that it maintains the support of the world and the West in particular. Because without that, it could make the situation even worse. Another potential risk of this is that it makes many in the region incensed. If there's this view that that there's no proportionality, that Israel is imposing punitive damage on the Palestinian people who were, victims of the Hamas almost as much as anything else, then there could be more sympathy for even the Hamas and more resistance to Israel. And the biggest concern right now is in the northern border of Israel with Lebanon, with the Hezbollah, which is backed by Iran. And what we don't want to do is make it even easier for their people to say, yes, we're going to rise up against Israel. That would open up a second front against Israel, and it could potentially expand the war and cause even more Israeli casualties. And that's why I say this is so important for Israel to get right. And let me again reiterate this point, is that in the aftermath of this, just like in the United States after 9/11, our people, shore to shore, coast to coast, wanted revenge. We wanted our government to protect us. We wanted to immediately retaliate against those that did it. And Israel's desire is understandable and just as passionate, possibly even more so in some cases, because of the egregious nature of not just a bunch of people killed in a building like we had, which was bad enough, but because they specifically personally went after old people, little kids, babies, old people. There was even a woman who was a Holocaust survivor who was actually taken and captured by the Palestinians. I can't even imagine the horror that must be going on in that woman's mind and also in her family's. And so Israel has every right to defend itself, but they can't, in a lust to go and get revenge, cause their own situation to worsen and possibly expand this war. That's bad for everybody. It's bad for Israel. It's bad for the United States. It's bad for the people in the region. So we need to get this contained. Israel needs to justify itself. Israel needs to get justice for itself to defend its people, so that they all know that they can count on their government, and that's a reasonable thing. But we have to be sure it's done wisely, even in such a horrific situation. Thanks for listening. That's your deep dive for today. We'll see you next time.